Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/slash Tales from Tech Support. In today's episode, I'm sorry, we've billed how many hours on this customer? It feels like the first time. I've got pin pads. They're multiplying. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. I'm sorry, we've billed how many hours on this customer? 2 years ago I took a job at an MSP that promised me loads of training and all kinds of salary improvements as I proved myself with certs. They never delivered on either end and I left that job. Here's my favorite story from working there. $me. $L1 level 1 tech that somehow made as much as me at L2. $L3 level 3/engineer/tech boss, number 2 in charge of MSP. Customer medical company owner, very cheap, and in this case, very impatient, rightfully so. When I started working at this MSP, I remember that $L1 was working on a laptop and backing up a massive PST file from Outlook so he could repair and possibly wipe the computer for some unknown reason. $L1 and $L3 were talking about how this was the final straw, and they would just tell the customer that there was nothing else to do shy of buying a new computer if this didn't work. Something also got mentioned about the hours spent on it to the tune of 15 to 20 so far. Thankfully the customer was contracted and this wasn't billed hourly for him. The customer was however notorious for not having any spare inventory, and only buying himself a decent spec'd computer. Everyone else was 4 GB RAM and 256 HD in 2019. $L1 finished whatever he was doing and returns laptop. Nothing is heard from customer for a few weeks. Flash forward and I get a call from customer who is upset that his Excel macro is once again not working for his POs, and that it works on everyone's computer except his, which was true because one of his tech-savvy employees wrote the macro. Since $L1 and $L3 had taken a look at it, now it's my turn to suffer this customer. $L3 tells me that he has done everything he can think of for this customer, and has no clue how the Excel macro gets wonky on this guy's computer only. I talked to customer, and we set up a time for me to look at remote. Later. $me, remote into customer's computer and see that he has 2 monitors, one with terribly small resolution and the other, native display, which is much better. I select the native display and he shows me the error. The macros will run, but they're behaving oddly. Buttons aren't where they should be in dialog boxes display at the bottom of screen instead of next to the buttons. Customer, see? It does this every time. $me, Let's close it out and reopen. Excel now opens the sheet on the native display instead of the external monitor and things work normally. How's this? Customer, oh yes. This is perfect. Thanks. $me hangs up, thinking customer must just be the type that attracts weird errors. 15 minutes later. Customer, hey, it's doing it again. $me, remote into native display, customer drags it over and shows errors, close and reopen. There you go. Customer, thanks. Click. 5 minutes later. $me, hi customer, is it doing it again? Customer, yeah. $me, I look over the errors and start giving Excel a once-over. See that Excel shows that it is in a mode for compatibility rather than display. Do you always look at this sheet on your external monitor? Customer, yeah, why? $me, okay, let me try something. Switched Excel to display mode instead of compatibility mode, and allow it to launch on external display. Now it works. Never got a call for the issue again. Apparently there was a generic driver installed for this super old monitor that the customer picked up, and since we didn't purchase it or set that monitor up, no one knew it didn't have the right driver, or the best driver. Since it was a generic Windows driver, it seems to have not allowed Excel to display the macros properly when in compatibility mode, which, from what I can tell, it launched in because he always used Excel on this monitor and never his native screen. $L1 and $L3 could never replicate the issue because they saw him do it, then had him email the file. When it worked fine on their machine, they thought it must be something else, so they had him bring the machine in, only to not be able to replicate in Office. They got so far off the trail that they thought something with the way Outlook handled the attachment when the employee emailed it had caused the issue, even though the same file was emailed to them by $customer. Each of them spent close to 10 hours working on this man's computer, when a quick remote session would have sufficed. It feels like the first time. This is a kind of introductory post to serve as a foundation for some stories that involve dealing with lost, left behind, and neglected electronic goods of all shapes and sizes. My position is a non-customer facing one in a retail environment, and though it's not the formal job description, in most stores it's understood to be the in-house broken stuff fixer. Most of what I do that's IT related is troubleshoot malfunctioning equipment such as registers, computers, and printers, and call the IT help desk for replacements under warranty or more complicated solutions like anything that requires programming or administrator access. Am I a glorified user? My previous store had been kept in tip-top shape for 20 plus years by my counterpart. I was only part-time there, but she taught me almost everything I know, and the dedicated IT for that district, current district, has no such thing, sadly, said our store was one of the best she'd seen, that other stores had non-working registers with scrapped parts, and no logs for troubleshooting or replacements with what looked like years of neglect. In the store I was now transferring to, I'd realize exactly what was meant by that. Before my first day, I got a call asking me if I would do this off-the-floor position full-time instead of the previously discussed sales position, as their current associate just put their notice in. Being a simple sales associate had an air of romance about it that I had been looking forward to, but given my experiences over the last few years it felt like my professional duty to help them out of a tight spot, so I agreed. I had some time before my soon-to-be predecessor's last day, so I could observe and learn the nuances of their store. It was a complete 180 from everything I knew, and I must have looked truly horrified because even with a mask on, people were asking me, "Are you all right?" I'll spare you the non-IT details, but my first few weeks were largely focused on correcting a lot of standard practices that were not being followed, for sake of not getting fired if basically anyone decided to do an audit. One of the very first things I did do though was a quick sweep across the front end to identify and put in tickets for any non-working skin guns, pin pads, printers, cash registers, etc. This turned out to be a good decision because it earned me instant rep as someone dependable among the associates who had been putting up with issues for years. Once I became familiar with the new environment and more fluid with my basic tasking, I had enough free time to start deep diving a bit. My office is through the server room and a small closet type thing, both of which were filled to the brim with boxes, some of them with shipping labels going back to 2018 and notes that say hold for technician, but most of it just unlabeled random electronic components for POS systems. Additionally, nooks across the front end had similar electronics haphazardly thrown into opaque plastic totes on shelves. Registers that had been scrapped for parts when others broke were being used as desks, and all registers working and non-working had multiple drawers being used for hoarding-level storage as well. It was like a junk drawer, but the whole store was the drawer. After asking my new supervisor if I could consolidate everything in my office, I got to work decluttering and reorganizing. Putting replacement cables into labeled envelopes was easy enough. I threw away any that were used. I had dozens, but piles of scan guns and pin pads in boxes with fallen-off sticky notes that just say broken were going to take a little longer, and went into clear plastic totes for later troubleshooting. It was long road ahead, but nothing I was doing could make it any worse. Sometimes I wonder how many thousands of dollars the store lost in warranty replacements not sent back over 2 years or more. No matter how exhaustively I search, to this day, the occasional thing from the before time is appearing out of nowhere. Most of the stories I have that are centered around a single incident are to do with said appearing things, particularly the ones that are large in scope or endlessly problematic. I hope you enjoy my stories to come as much as I enjoy recounting them. I've got pin pads. They're multiplyin'. Background. This story is a bit old and has mega paraphrasing. Today's agenda: 8 obsolete pin pads that were probably changed out during our front end overhaul sometime before the pandemic took hold in the US. Our store has a forum associates can access to ask questions across the company, and I used this to ask for the best course of action for getting rid of these things as I had never done it before. Someone from corporate saw my post and made arrangements for them to be shipped to a company that does end-of-life disposal for most of our tech, and left me all the necessary details in a PM. Excellent. Let me just box these up and take them to our shipping and receiving department so they can handle it from here. $Me, I have 8 pin pads here ready to be shipped out to company, and here are the details. $Overworked coworker, alright. Is the whole pallet getting sent out, or just those? $Me, the whole what? $Overworked coworker points to a pallet in the overhead with one huge box on it. There's about 20 more just like those on that pallet from over a year ago when they did some install on the front end. $Me, please drop that pallet for me. Sure enough, that pallet had probably 20 more of the obsolete style pin pad, as well as 6 new ones unopened, with all the brackets and hardware to go with them. Not wanting to take up space on the floor, I whipped out my phone and started taking pictures of every relevant paper I could see before letting my coworker get it back in the overhead and running back to my office to ask more questions to the helpful woman from corporate on that forum. It turned out they already anticipated a pallet's worth of pin pads being left over from the refresh, and the shipping arrangements were for that pallet entirely. Double excellent. I relayed all of this information to my coworker and the assistant manager above me. At first she wanted me to just keep the 6 new ones, but changed her mind when I said we might get billed when they receive the pallet with X less than were shipped or marked as complete by the original installers. Things seemed fine, until a month passed, and we still had the pallet. I also had more time at this point to ponder things, and I realized the following. By my count, the pallet had 3 fewer new pin pads than it should given how many were supposed to be installed around our store, and there existed 3 registers that had been so neglected, scrapped for parts, and used as storage shelves that they were unrecognizable as registers at the time of the refresh and did not get the pin pads replaced. They did not even have plexiglass put up last year for distancing. Those 3 pin pads were definitely removed from the pallet, but not installed, and nowhere to be found. Now knowing that this project wasn't completed and there are incomplete registers, it didn't seem right to try to send them all back. I went back to my manager to discuss this further. Me, hey, remember that pallet I told you about with the pin pads I said we might get charged for if we don't send them back? Manager, yeah, I do. Me, I changed my mind. I want to take 3 pin pads and the corresponding brackets off the pallet to use to finish the installation from a year and a half ago for these 3 registers. Manager, do it. Music to my ears. Even if we hadn't gotten charged yet for those extra 3 and do because of this, it's easier than deciding later that we need to get these registers up and running and placing orders for new stuff that could get lost or just be the wrong thing. I shamefully go back to shipping/receiving and ask my coworker to drop the pallet for me again so I can take what I need and get to work. It was pretty simple to do, a few screws to remove the old bracket and put the new one on, and the new pin pad clicks right into place. Old pin pads are already on the pallet, and I just tossed the old brackets and cables in the trash since none of the ones from the original install were saved either. Making the shipping arrangements over again, on the other hand, didn't go quite as smoothly. The company changed social media platforms and all my PMs with the relevant information got wiped, and I learned a valuable lesson about writing everything down. The phone number in the last page of the 2019 project just rings forever. The carrier requires a BOL, and the company we're shipping it all to can only provide me with the destination address. I had to get with a supervisor who worked in that department previously to help me create one and schedule a pickup. They missed that appointment, by the way. In between installing the new pin pads and calling to arrange for them to be shipped off, 2 more old pin pads were rediscovered and given to me. One was dug out of the manager's office during cleaning after leadership changes. The other was buried in a tool chest on a shelf I somehow missed when trying to organize everything at the end of 2020.